Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm Max Feinsich, and this is our first episode of Telescope Tech Insights, where we talk with tech leaders and we learn from the best. We'll cover a broad range of subjects, everything from hiring, organizing teams, best practices around software development, remote work, development processes, managing technology, tech debt, whatever is interesting for all of us builders. We'll try to touch on it and try to uncover some of the latest trends, things that are happening in the market that might actually change the way we're building software. So we can all learn and be better at our craft. And with that, today, I'm really honored to have with us Eric Wong. He's been a great friend of Telescope for many years, a customer, and he's currently the head of engineering at Ladder Health. Welcome, Eric.
Thanks, Max, for having me. Happy to be the pilot or guinea pig for this uh, presentation.
That's fantastic, and really appreciate it. I'm sure we're gonna have fun, and we're gonna learn a lot from you. So, if you want to just give us a little bit of background, obviously you've grown through the ranks as an engineer. You started as an individual contributor and became, very quickly director, but VP of engineering, and CTO for small and large companies through your path. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing now and how you know how it's been different in some ways than what it's been doing up until now, and what surprised you, what's fun, what's not so much fun, so we can get a sense of you and your work right now.
Sure. So at Ladder Health, we're a small, early stage startup company that is focused on providing access to better resources for young children with potential developmental delays. So this is a big pain point, a big gap, certainly around the world, but definitely in the United States, where we're starting a pilot in Massachusetts. And before this, I was various engineering leadership roles, and as you mentioned, starting out as an individual contributor in the industry. Actually had sort of a non-traditional path into the industry with a mechanical engineering degree, but through some hard work, a lot of mistakes, some great managers and support along the way. Started with individual contributor roles and then moving into more senior leadership on the technical side, and then to the kind of VP, CTO level, and most recently for a couple of ed tech startups, also in the mission focus space. I'd say one thing that's really exciting now with Ladder, and I'll definitely caveat this. I've been here 3 weeks, which is really exciting. Our scale is super small, right? So it's really myself and the founder at this point, looking to take an MVP to market. Previous companies, we've had at least probably some revenue or some existing customers before, probably more than just a couple of employees, although it definitely been on the side where we've had less than 10. So it's definitely the smallest I've been before, so the earliest stages, but I think it's a really exciting time. And certainly we're super motivated and excited to try to close the impact, provide a great impact and close the gap for what we see as a big challenge in the country today.
That's fantastic. Thanks for that. I have so many questions already. I think the first thing that I've noticed is that most of the work you've done has always had a very deep mission behind it, right? You just described what you're doing, which I think is amazing. But it's not only amazing, like the impact that you guys can have is quite meaningful. Is that something you look for, or has it been serendipitous? And do you think it affects the type of people that you're able to attract and the teams you're able to build and how they operate, or are those things sort of separate?
It's a great question. Yeah, it's funny now. I think being older and looking back, I definitely see it as kind of an emerging or constant thread in my career. I think for myself, and I did a lot of reflection about this. I find that when I have personal attachment to the company's mission, to the vision, it really helps me with kind of engagement and motivation. And I'm sure that's the same for a lot of people. But for myself, there, as I would share with teammates and colleagues and coworkers, there are always going to be challenges, whether they're technical challenges, business challenges, sometimes people challenges. And, there are tough times and also wild rides and successes. But for me, having that motivation and personal attachment to the mission has been something that always, is really drives me to get out of bed in the morning, be excited to dig into that day and see what opportunities are there, and helps me sort of stay kind of balanced, I think, long term with, the near term today, tactical, like we need to get this done, we need to figure this out with, oh, be able to get there. This is the impact we're having. Really give you that kind of, motivation and push when you really need it. I think it's extremely powerful too when you share in the successes or just learn the outcomes and see what you're doing and hear from customers, hear from users, hear from students, hear from families about how you've had a positive impact on their lives. That's super powerful and something that kind of keeps me going.
That's awesome. No, I love it. I think there's definitely a lot of power in being able to align a team, across a single, important mission, and the type of people you attract is also sort of different. Now, if you look back, when you were younger and you get to give yourself advice, maybe not coming out of college, but a couple of jobs into the real world, and now you have to prioritize. It can be, I have this offer, it's the best paying offer, but they're working on this like old stack. I hate it, but they're gonna pay me really well. There's this other team that seems a little disorganized, but they're like a bunch of rock stars that, from what I've seen, they've built and done amazing things in their previous gigs, and they seem to be able to take very young talent and mentor them. And then there's the third bucket, which is more like the ideal tech stack, people working in the coolest technology, a little bit bigger company, maybe the slower growth. How do you prioritize those, and what advice do you give yourself, if you're in that person's shoes?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think everyone, I think at various stages of their careers, thinks about those types of doors. I would usually lean towards, I say, door number two, which is, and my advice to early career Eric or other engineers is to find and focus on the places that where you can think you can learn the most, especially in your career. I think whether you can be surrounded by really bright, superly motivated, talented people, and just be a sponge and learn from them. I think the tech will come with time. I think there's so much more available now, and in terms of the access to information and the frameworks and the courses, those are really easy. I think it's easier now to pick those up if there's something that I want to try out as a hobby or try to integrate into my company's tech stack. But for me, it's always about the journey, the learning process, and even today with I'll say multiple decades of experience, I feel still every day I'm learning something new. Ladder Health, not my first venture into healthcare, but certainly new to this kind of area of early childhood development. Trying to get a better sense of what are the challenges that families are facing of all different types and demographics. This is a really interesting chance to kind of experiment a little bit with our go-to-market and product strategy. Do we focus more on kind of scale or more breadth or kind of depth in a narrow area? Do we go directly to consumer, focus mostly on a B2B with sort of insurance payer companies? And all those things I don't know, but I need to learn and figure out. So that's where I would tend to lean toward, give guidance if asked.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I feel like continuous learning is one of these key, uh, not just early indicators, but actually one of the strongest indicators of success in the long term, right? People who are looking to learn new things get, I mean, what you're talking about is a lot of business concerns, maybe even outside of the world of engineering, but there is no engineering without the business side of what you're building, right? So I think that's spot on. We're like trying to get, surrounded by the best and brightest and most passionate people. Definitely pays off in the end. And so along those same lines, in that same thread, at some point you went from individual contributor to a manager, right? Where you decided like, I gotta choose. There's these two paths. They're very distinct. In one, I'm gonna become, a principal, an architect, and you wear some of those titles along the way. But then decided to go more kind of the people manager. I'm gonna have leverage over a larger team, and maybe I'm gonna distance myself a little bit from the keyboard. Maybe I'll always be technical. I'll always be coding, but my main job is gonna be to enable a broader group of people to be very effective with what we're building. How do you think through that decision? And again, how would you advise somebody, 5 years into their career who now has to make this choice?
Yeah. My advice, a couple of points I wanted to make, and I certainly have experience firsthand. I don't think it's very rarely sort of a one-way decision. In fact, myself, I've kind of gone back and forth between manager, back to technical lead, back to manager a couple of times, and I think that's perfectly normal. And I think a lot more accessible these days. Where maybe several years ago that transition was a little bit more difficult. The opportunities were fewer. So I would say for those that are starting out that aren't sure, you don't have to make a binding decision right now that's going to set you on the one path the rest of your life. look for the ones that you feel like you will succeed at today and maybe tomorrow, but don't rule out that maybe you will have to change, and that's okay. For me, it's been over time the ability to kind of combine the challenges of problem solving on kind of the technical side, where we have mostly kind of like what I call structured problems, which are, generally we have ways to through algorithms or best practices or scale or to sort of solve the technical problems. Still very interesting. Still very a top opportunity to learn a lot with new technologies, new patterns, new best practices, learning from other people. I love to pair that with helping to solve and sort of enhance the people side as well. I've been fortunate to be a member of great, outstanding engineering teams, and that puzzle for me is really interesting of trying to, match and guide and coach and lead the kind of people puzzle along that is trying to solve that technical puzzle, right? So, and I think the people side of things is a little bit more complex, right? Because we don't have as much sometimes training about it. What worked with one particular team is not necessarily going to work with another team in the future because people are different, the conditions are different. Whereas on the technical side, generally your ability to reuse or go to the same toolbox is a lot higher, right? So that sort of puzzle is really interesting to me. And I think when you sort of combine them, I am really intrigued by the opportunity to sort of have a 1+1=3 opportunity where you have sort of like these two things coming together, and the end result is something that is like truly fantastic in terms of having really great positive impact and building a great product, having a great time doing it, and solving some interesting technical problems along the way. So I'd say for those that are trying to decide, certainly you have your own priorities, but don't feel like, at least for me, it wasn't sort of a binding decision. And sometimes you have to go switch kind of grades of the pendulum. That's perfectly okay.
I love it. That's great advice. And so you mentioned something which I want to, do a little deep dive. I've actually seen you and, how you manage your teams. There's this like huge spectrum, you might have a team of 50 people that are like really slow, unproductive, can't get, their stuff out. They're like always behind. And then there's smaller teams, medium-sized teams that are just incredibly effective, incredibly efficient. And I've seen you run those teams, what's the magic behind I don't know if it's the culture, if you think it's culture, is it the processes? What are the things that unlocks, and it's not a number of people there, it's more like the effectiveness of how they're working, how they're building, how they're collaborating that actually unlocks that productivity. What are some of those like, very tactical tips that you've seen work from your experience?
Sure, and hopefully you're talking more on the like small, highly effective side, and not
Yeah,
the
yeah, no, that's what I've
large.
seen. Yeah, well, you were able to push out so many features always on time with the roadmap while keeping up with some of the tech debt stuff that is always looming over most enterprises. And it was impressive to see, how much you could get done with like a smaller team, right?
Yeah, so yeah, certainly, and there's a number of lessons learned and best practices over the years, and not saying they will always work, but I think a couple that rise to the top for me, I think really, and it goes down to comes back to the people and the collaboration, is that one, having that shared sense of mission, right? This goes back to having ideally working for something that is you can really understand and wrap your head around why this is an important problem to solve or opportunity to seize. And I think that in the engineering, it really means that I want the engineers in my team to have access to that information, right? So I think in some organizations, and I've certainly been a part of a few, that there's a little bit of a firewall literally between engineers and customers and discovery and feedback. And it's not to say that engineers should be on sales calls and talking to customers every day, but on a regular basis, for example, are you if you're doing kind of an agile sprint model at the beginning or at the end of the sprint, are you able to share a customer feedback or a customer story that is relevant to the work that the team has done or is about to do, right? So they understand the impact of their work. Another one is that are we trying to celebrate this? I love how you said have the emphasis on continuous learning. Is that you have to sort of, if you want that to be part of your company's and team's DNA, you have to recognize it, you have to celebrate it, and build in ways for it to make it happen, right? So a couple small things, and these are just like very subtle, but sometimes can have powerful effects. Is especially in the remote world, At one company, we really encouraged the use of public Slack channel messaging for asks for help, right? So it wasn't really, on a team of 7, sometimes you would have people go one-to-one or kind of like direct message each other. And at the end of the day, that gets the job done, but doesn't let other people know that this has happened, right? So I think it's a really great role modeling exercise, especially for those that are senior in the team, because I know as engineers, sometimes we're reserved about not wanting to ask for help, right? Or seeming that we have imposter syndrome or don't know how to do something. But if I can raise my hand in the Slack channel and be like, hey, I'm having this problem today. Can anyone help me out? That's a great way to sort of start that conversation. Another one was, and this is, I won't take credit for this, something one member of my team did once. We adjusted the sprint retrospective process. So we had, your usual pains and gains listed, and the team contributes to those and goes through each one. But this engineer suggested we add a learnings column. And so people were also contributing that, in the last sprint, I learned that we had, this little utility command that I didn't know that makes my life easier. Or I learned from someone else about how to solve this particular technical challenge. Or I learned this about the business. And so by bringing it to the forefront and celebrating it and giving recognition around it, I think it's a great way to sort of build that cadence of momentum. And it's also great that you look back over time and you can say that, we actually learned these things, right? Sort of like journaling your success. So those are some of the small things that we do to really celebrate team success. But I think it is that combination of, having that mission focus, united. I'm not being prescriptive about how to solve a problem. The team understands the root of the problem, what they're trying to solve, hopefully is empowered to do it and come up with optionality and debate and discuss, but also, wants to find out quickly the results of their work, or at least move forward and get something out there. And then there's a way to reflect that and learn upon that on a regular basis and kind of lather, rinse, repeat. That's something that definitely has, I'd say, like, I want to make sure that, that type of culture is consistent.
Oh, that's great. I mean, it's funny how sometimes little things, right? Even if it's just documenting and communicating and celebrating little successes can have such a big impact in people's, psyche, mindset, motivation, productivity. So just a specific thing that I've seen you do, which I always thought was interesting, in the team that we worked together with, some of the Telescope engineers, you had this like rotating bug hunter role. I've always seen like, people like, always struggle. Should there be points assigned to a bug so we can have them in the sprint and be reflected as part of the work done? Should it be the person who created the feature to take care of the bug so that people have an incentive to not add bugs to the code base? How do you think through that, and how did that work? Is it something that you've done multiple times and continue to plan doing, or did it just happen at that one company?
I think that sort of like need or critical function, which is essentially, I will say, sort of combination of triage, customer support, customer impacting, providing value. It has, I think, many different names and different shapes. And so one particular company, we called it, I think, Fixer. It was sort of a weekly rotation, and there was sort of a set of responsibilities. It was part proactive systems administrator to go look for anomalies. It was part hygiene, care and feeding engineer to keep our dependencies up to date. It was also sort of point triage for anything, kind of coming in from production that we need to investigate. And then maybe turn out to be a bug and maybe goes to a team, maybe goes to the backlog, maybe we need to fix it right now and escalate it to something bigger, right? So I think the main principle is that, one, we want to define what that function is, because it is, I'm pretty sure every company has this, right? Every organization has this. They may call it different things, and they have different shapes and sizes, but this is a critical need because it has to be, resourced. And there's varying degrees. Sometimes of the year, it can be something that, maybe it's half person, but in other times, maybe it's higher tempo. You need a full team doing it, right? Or it's sustaining engineering or in larger organizations, right? So I think important, one, to recognize that this need is there, and it's a multifaceted one, as I mentioned, with many different roles. We couldn't just sort of combine one, but I've also been in organizations where we tend to split that out, right? Or we maybe farm out the dependency updates to different teams. I think one of the goals is to, especially, and this is where I think working in small organizations is really important, or really has an impact, is that trying to shield or provide a layer of communication so that, we all try to avoid getting, that kind of like cost interrupts, context switching tax too much, right? So there never is going to be enough, at least in my experience, to have enough engineers to, have all the knowledge of all the support of the code and to be able to have time to balance these things that come in, sometimes unplanned work, right? So by having a role or a designated person or persons to help balance that and sort of serve as the point of contact. It not only helps to shield the team, but also provides consistency to your business and stakeholders, right? So they know that, okay, we have a light process to do this. We actually had a Slack channel or something. Some organizations, we've had a Jira workflow, but it definitely provides sort of a little bit of light process so it doesn't become a mess and there's actually follow through and value that's provided to the business, right? We're providing transparency, communication. This is a bug. This is not a bug. This is when it get fixed. It's impacting customer now, so that's where I responded on the engineering side. And this is where we're collaborating with product around prioritization. This is affect the current team. I think it's make sure you have those channels that are open and have a way to lightly classify these by impact, so that we don't have big disagreements over that, right? So call it fixer, call it triage, call it responder, whatever it is. I think this exists in many companies, but has a very high impact on small and moving companies that are moving quickly. And so I think it's important to sort of call it out and make sure you devote resources for it. Probably will never be enough resources, but call it out. And this is something that is important to as a leader that you want to share and make sure the business is aware of, right?
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense, and I think the call it something, have clarity, clear communication, and then a well thought through process as to how do we approach it, because it's going to be there no matter what. That makes a lot of sense. Now, jumping off of that, I mean, you said it's going to be hard to have full coverage. Like no company will ever have that level of support on the bug fixing side of things. That brings me to maybe our last one of our couple last questions. As AI has taken the minds and I don't know, a lot of fantasies maybe for people out there, as an engineer, as an engineering leader, as a builder. How do you think AI is going to affect our day-to-day software developers, whether that's on the building side, the learning side, the effectivity, maybe QA? Like, what are some of the things that you're seeing that are interesting and trends that you just kind of can plot the dots moving forward as to where we're going with the impact of AI?
Sure. I mean, I think with any technology or tool, and certainly AI is a powerful one. As an engineer, especially as an engineering leader, I want to make sure that we do deliberate over including this into our suite of tools or tool stack, right? So whether it is a UI framework or a database technology or something like AI, I want to make sure that if we are to introduce this into our everyday tool set, we're doing it for the right reasons, so that it's providing value in some form that we can quantify, either to engineers that maybe is more customer impacting over time because we're more efficient, or actually in the product itself because it's saving customers time or solving a pain point, right? So I think the implementation is we want to make sure that it is something that is supported, meets our sort of like cost and budget, and is effective. I would say that some of the things that I'm really interested in and certainly have seen good successes. I certainly think kind of the as kind of assist model, where like call it GitHub Copilot, where in terms of sort of, I'll say sort of like templating and be able to provide helper type function is extremely powerful, right? So making the engineers' lives easier by removing that 10, 20, 30% of like, oh, how do I write this particular class or method? Like, oh, I can focus now on like the actual like business problem I'm trying to solve, right? So I think that's one certainly thing that's powerful. I think the potential or its usage in terms of extracting value from unstructured data is really intriguing. The ability to go into and sort of create these vector databases out of all this unstructured data, whereas before we were thinking about things like JSON or XML or having to do a lot of string parsing. Now, do I trust it 100% to hand it over the keys to the kingdom? Probably not. But in terms of like providing, I think there's some very high ROI things, like certainly getting to 90+% on transcriptions, right? And meeting notes, summarization functionality, where now even for users or customers who are trying to provide a summary of maybe like case notes or intervention records over time, right? If anything, I want to make sure that if it is being trained on data, that we have the right kind of protections and standards in place to make sure that it's secure, we're enforcing privacy, and we're not causing hallucinations like that. I do think there are some interesting sort of like sort of augmenting tools, right? So I think there's someone called I think it's called LangFuse, which is sort of like the observation and monitoring of your sort of LLM stack. That's sort of interesting to sort of see where your costs are going and how sort of the traceability of that technology. I think there's some new tools coming out that are like helping to implement sort of like private or guardrails around context and certain LLMs, which is interesting. So I expect a lot more in that ecosystem. So I'd say like, going measured, but with expectations. But I think there is potential there for a lot of AI contributions. The last one I'll say is like really for greenfield exercises. I've seen some interesting implementations where like you're standing at the whiteboard, you don't know where to start. It's great to have a straw man to be able to just start to provide feedback on. I think AI there for that kind of like greenfield, help me get started type stuff is really effective for engineers.
That's fantastic. That's super helpful. And I think, it's incredible the pace at which this is changing. So, you look back 6 months ago, a year ago, and some of the things we see now might have seemed impossible or like way into the future, but we haven't. So it's a pretty interesting area. Thanks for sharing that. And just to wrap, maybe our last question, which is a little more tactical, but do you have a favorite question that you like to ask in an interview when you're hiring someone? And if you do, if you want to share, and if not, or yes, what is behind it? What are you trying to get at? It's a little bit, again, advice for our audience here.
Sure. Actually, I'll give you a bonus. I have two. So they're not difficult. They're just, the first is like something I ask a candidate: is there something that you're currently doing in your current job or maybe your previous role that ideally you would like to be doing less of in your next role, which is made with our company. And the second question is, if we were to hire you and another engineer, and 6 months from now, it is a great success. Tell us why, and tell us about the other engineer that we're hiring, because the two of you are working very close together. What qualities about them have made the combination with you a great success, right? So in both cases, I think it's, I'm looking for sort of a sense of just like ability to be share some self-awareness around what makes you successful, where you're most productive, where I'm most kind of curious and motivated to work on. And sometimes the answer to the first question is like, oh, I had too many meetings in my last role, or I want to work with this specific technology. That's fine too, but I want to make sure that you have it is encouraging the candidates to sort of reflect on kind of what they are doing or what they have done, and do they need to sort of evolve or want to do something different. And that's interesting. It's me as a manager and as a team member. And for the second question, I'm looking for more also kind of like similar, what are the things that will complement you the best? So if you need a little bit more, someone who is maybe a little bit more direct with feedback, or helps you with this particular type of technology problem, or is able to be kind of a mind thought partner when it comes to thinking through problems, right? And so encouraging candidates to sort of think about who can best amplify me, best set me up for success. I want to know that, especially too as a prospective manager.
Yeah, well, that's great. Thanks for sharing that. I think it's super insightful. Awesome. So I think with that, that's all the questions I had. I don't know if there's any other tips, tidbits, or anything else you want to share from your side before we wrap.
Certainly lots more, but I'm happy to come back for another episode if the pilot does well.
All right, fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Eric. This has been fantastic. Really, really enjoyed the conversation, and I appreciate you being open to sharing and helping other engineers who are out there looking for, maybe their next thing or how to approach areas that are sometimes confusing. And your insights, your experience have been super valuable. So with that, it's a wrap for our first episode, and please come back and check us out. We're going to keep on posting this on the Telescope Network, and we'll have awesome people like Eric join us. Thank you so much, Eric. Have a great day.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
Bye-bye.